Hi, I'm Megan Quitty, and I'll be talking about WannaCry ransomware. And some of the basics, before we start this presentation, I'll touch upon what ransomware is. It's a recent hacking method used by criminals to get money from victims. They encrypt victims' information until they pay a given ransom to get their information back, but they don't always get their information back. Sometimes hackers encrypt the information, they take the ransom, but then they just leave without giving the victim their information back. And some of the other topics that we keep talking about in this presentation is whether or not we should pay the ransom, some of the legal actions we can take against creators of ransomware, the ethical responsibility, and some of the steps that we can take to prevent ransomware and data breaches. So WannaCry, in particular, is a version of ransomware that gained popularity in May of 2017. In a 2017 article from TechSpective, they state that it affected millions of Windows machines used by companies of 150 different countries. Hackers demanded a ransom to be paid through Bitcoin within 3 days, or else they would increase the ransom. It spread by targeting vulnerabilities in Windows systems using the internal glue server message block exploit and double pulsar, which is a backdoor malware. Some of the legal issues surrounding ransomware is that the creation and use of WannaCry and other versions is against laws that deal with ransomware, computer extortion, and hacking. A 2016 post by the National Conference of State Legislatures states that while there are few laws that address ransomware, courts can still attempt to prosecute by using many of the other laws that are already established, like the computer extortion and hacking. In the National Attorneys General Training and Research Institute Journal of 2016, they state that even Congress's Computer Fraud and Abuse Act is still vague about some of the necessary points needed to criminalize ransomware. CFAA's main purpose is to make it illegal to access a protected computer, but it still becomes blurry when ransomware uses botnets to spread their malware. And some of the legal or ethical issues that we'll be touching upon is a couple questions about responsibility. Who is responsible for the data breach and allowance of ransomware to invade their system? And does an affected company have the ethical responsibility to notify the company's stakeholders and customers of the breach? And should we pay the ransom? We look at some of the ethics of that topic, and we look at some of the ethical frameworks and different views that would revolve around ransomware. So first, with the responsibility. So the question of who is responsible for the data breach, I would say the security or other technical teams that have been tasked with the duty of securing that data and updating systems would totally be responsible for the breaches. They are there for the securing of the system. If they fail to do so, they are who's at fault. And do they have the ethical responsibility to notify stakeholders and customers? Of course, companies should be held accountable for their lack of effort to secure their systems, and they need to give stakeholders and customers heads up if there's a possibility that their information could be breached and leaked to the public. Now, for the ethics of paying a ransom, we look at virtue, ethics, utilitarianism, deontology, and some practical ethics. First, virtue ethics is based on improving your character and making decisions that maximize a person's chance of living a good life. They make decisions that do not harm others. So by paying a ransom, you are also providing resources to criminals to repeat the same crimes. If they repeat the same crimes, you are, in essence, enabling the criminals and harming others, and you're helping and affecting other companies, which goes against the values of virtue ethics. For utilitarianism, it measures the utility of particular action and makes decisions based on which one provided the most utility. In other words, it's doing the most good for the greatest number of people. And so while you would think that paying to retrieve the encrypted information would be good for everyone in the company, that would be ethical in the terms of utilitarianism, it's not, because it would, like I mentioned before, it would provide resources to the criminals to infect other companies. So the best bet, if you're looking at a utilitarianism side, is to not pay the ransom. For deontology, it's based on making decisions that are universal and can be applied to all situations. So paying a ransom wouldn't be treated the same universally. A great example is making the decision to paying a ransom. That decision is different for making a personal decision to get your personal information back. That decision is different than making the decision of paying the ransom and getting healthcare information back. In the case of WannaCry, many of the organizations that were affected in May of 2017 were healthcare organizations, and so they had to make that decision of whether or not they were going to pay that ransom to get the information back for their patients. And so that decision is going to be significantly different for than making the decision for your personal information. And our cybersecurity ethics textbooks explains Peter Singer's view of paying a ransom in the terms of practical ethics. Practical ethics looks at the big picture and makes realistic decisions based on that particular information situation. He says that it's likely to lead to more incidents and more companies being affected, like we've already talked about. And so Peter Singer would also suggest not paying that ransom in order to stop the hackers in their tracks, as opposed to moving on to other companies. Now lastly, we talk about some of the steps we can take to preventing it. A 2017 article from the Compliance and Ethics blogs touches on some of those steps that companies can take to prevent data breaches and ransomware. First, you should maintain malware compliance and keep systems updated. You should ensure that your employees aren't downloading external programs or files onto company systems in order to reduce the likelihood of infecting company systems. You should also discourage employees from transferring data via USB devices. Flash drives can easily be infected and with malware and spyware. The connection of those USB devices to company computers should be prevented in order to avoid possible infections. And of course, you should back up your files regularly. This allows companies to quickly restore information if their systems are compromised in situations of WannaCry ransomware or other forms of ransomware. And you should also encourage communication between employees and the IT department. Employees should feel comfortable enough to contact their IT departments if they feel that they accidentally downloaded something that could be infected. Catching these potential threats early on could be incredibly beneficial when dealing with the severity of data breaches and ransomware. So thank you for listening to my presentation on WannaCry ransomware, and I hope that you've been able to gain some insight on the topic. Thank you.